Hey guys, Mike here at Royclip's Productions. Today is the 17th of February 2017 and welcome to Beginner Series Video 5, in which we're basically going to be taking a look at studio grade monitor speakers. So welcome back to everyone who's been following so far. Thanks for all the comments and all the subscriptions and all that stuff. It's been great to kind of hear from you guys, and let's keep that conversation going. My Instagram as well has been doing great, really great conversation there guys, so I'm really pleased. Thank you very much. To anyone new, welcome. Essentially I'm going to follow the same format I've been doing to this point over the past month, in which we kind of have a little bit of a chat here, answer some common questions, look at some kind of popular or industry standard brands, if you like, a little bit about pricing, and then we jump onto the web and take a look. So, you know, I'd hope by this point you've figured out, or even bought, ideally, your computer, you've figured out your DAW, you've got your interface. And now you're looking at adding your monitoring to your setup. So that can be in the form of speakers or headphones. Headphones is going to be the next video. I'm literally going to be looking at monitor speakers in this video only. You know, I'm kind of going to talk about almost speakers that I've had personal... there are a couple in the list which I haven't, but mostly I want to talk about speakers I've had the most kind of experience with using myself, because I think that makes the most sense in terms of me articulating what I mean about speakers. You know... as a caveat to this video, and kind of answering the first question here about active and passive speakers, we're only going to be talking about active speakers in this video. What that basically means is an active speaker, it has power, so it's plugged into the wall. Yes, that's going to be another 2 plug sockets you need to plug into your studio, taking up your electricity, but that's how they work. So, you know, each individual driver in your speaker is powered by its own amp that's built into the speaker. Passive would require an external amplifier, which has just got its own set of complications in terms of how that fits into your setup from your interface. And I really don't think it's not very commonly used, if I'm honest. Most speakers are active, so we're going to look at active speakers. You know, these kind of... This question here, you know, which size of speaker do I need, you know, that really depends on the room that you're working in. You know, it's quite a subjective question, I suppose. You know, I work with, I'm using KRK Rocket 5s, by the way, guys, which are basically near-field 5-inch coned speakers. You know, I don't need a massive loud amount of sound in the rooms I work in. You know, in one room I was in, it was a little deep, and it could have done with perhaps the Rocket 6s, which were just slightly bigger, but these work fine for me. You know, if you're in a small room, you don't need a massive 10-inch driver. It's just going to be, you're going to be sort of feel like, you know, an aircraft or whatever, you know, and it's just going to be really loud. So that really size depends on room, and kind of almost how many kind of what the configuration of your drivers, which I'm going to come on to talk to in a little bit. You know, what is the best speaker and how much do they cost? Well, okay, price ranges in terms of this video, we're going to be looking from the kind of 239 mark for a pair, up to kind of about 1,500 for a single, so you'd be looking at 3 grand for a pair. A lot of speakers, by the way, guys, when they sell them, they'll sell them as a single. You know, it really spun me out the first time I went to buy my speakers, because I was expecting to sort of spend like £200, and I ended up having to spend 400 because what I saw was the single listed price. They don't often list them as a pair. I don't know why that is. I suppose because people have got, you know, an educated guess would be if you've got a surround sound configuration you're trying to configure, you may want to buy them as singles. That's the only thing I can think of as to why they would do that. So, you know, it's very subjective, and I've known people all over the place use very different speakers. So I was taught, back when I did production at a university in Brighton, I was taught by an engineer called Bodger, who worked with the likes of like S Club 7, Imogen Heap, the Bombay Dub Orchestra, which is a band I love, the Proclaimers, you know, Russell Watson, House Martin. So he's got a very mixed kind of discography, if you like, you know, and he used a lot of Genelec speakers. I know in his room he had a 5.1 setup. I'd love to meet that guy again, because his way of teaching you was just brilliant. You know, he really did not take any shit in the studio, which some of the guys didn't like, but it used to make me laugh quite a lot. So yeah, I learned a lot from him, and one of the things I learned from him about speakers was, you know, take this here, I've got Yamaha, and I've actually put in brackets there, you know, the NS10 story. So you'd have seen, if you're interested in music production and you're looking back at old studio pictures, there will be a set of NS10s in that video. So they're like a quite an ugly looking, in my opinion, square box with a white cone. And he has sort of said to me he thought they were a terrible speaker, you know, but just because they were around at that time and they became popular among the engineers, you know, everyone wants a set of Yamaha NS10s. You know, and he was almost saying, you know, don't buy a speaker, and I'm saying that to you as well, don't buy a speaker just because you've seen it in someone you admire's studio. That doesn't make sense. You know, you need to find a set of speakers that kind of work for you. Having said that, I did go into, back when I was in Brighton, I did go into Guitar and Amp, for anyone from Brighton who's watching, which is a great shop, by the way. They've got an online store as well. And I had about £1,000 in my pocket, and I needed to buy, you know, like an interface and some speakers. And they recommended the KRK Rocket 5s to me, which we're gonna have a look at. And I've stuck with them ever since. I've got used to them. So you'll get used to a set of speakers, and that's the first thing I'd say is when you first buy your set of speakers, just sit and listen to everything, all your favourite music, listen to it on those speakers, because you've got to get used to how they're outputting the sound, and you've got to get used to the kind of where they're perhaps not so great or where they're overcompensating. You know, is it quite as a flat response as you're looking for? Really, a studio speaker should be flat. It shouldn't shape or colour your sound, but just by definition of the way that the speaker's designed, while monitor speakers, like I say, should be flat, they're still going to colour the sound a little. It's just going to happen. So you've got to learn that, and your room will change the sound as well. So again, you've got to compensate for that, but that's something I'm going to come on to in a March later video. Okay, let's have a look. So let's jump over and talk about frequency response. So frequency response is essentially what your speaker is outputting to you, what it's capable of showing you. So 20 hertz to 20k, this is kind of like your you know, your human audible range. So all the way down here, we're looking at, this is your bassier kind of note, so less resolutions per second, or per minute even. And here we got 20,000. So it's kind of, you know, here's your really kind of like ear-splitting, you know, shrieky stuff. Your voices are kind of sit here, so this is almost like your core, where most things sit. So almost your mid-range driver is going to be dealing with this, your tweeter's going to be dealing with this, and then your kind of woofer is here, and your subwoofer is here. Not a lot of speakers have subwoofers built into them, guys, so you know, and subwoofers as well, you know, this gets a lot of conversation. You know, when you go to the cinema, it's all about air, guys. Like, the speakers push air out as energy. So the bigger the speaker, the louder the sound, because it's pushing out, it's a force of energy sound. So when you go to a really decent cinema that's got a really good sort of system in there, or, you know, for you guys into like EDM, where you go clubbing and you know, the people go on about the sound system and you feel that bass, or if you're in the cinema, keeping it contextually into what I do, and you kind of, you know, a building explodes or something and you really feel that building collapsing, that's the subs kicking in. It's not something that you really hear, it's something that you feel. So unless you want to shake your entire studio, you know, in terms of what you feel, it's going to be quite tricky to do. There's a reason these massive mixing places like Twickenham up the road from me in Surrey exist, where they can really smash out a surround sound mix, you know, and they can get those subs involved. So really looking at this chart, bringing it back, you know, you'd kind of almost want this line to be as flat as possible. You know, this you know, a typical frequency response, so it can cover the 20 to 20, but where this is sort of dipping and peaking and high, you know, and higher in decibels, is kind of where it's shaping your sound. So, you know, here, if you've got, say, at like 18 hertz here, the speaker actually can't deal with outputting that with much clarity in terms of volume, so you're going to be actually missing a little bit there. So when you put that into context with a mix, it might be that when you're actually mixing this frequency at, say, 18 hertz, you're kind of compensating and boosting that frequency because you can't really hear it, whereas actually your speaker isn't outputting it as clearly as it could. So you've got to learn what your speaker is and how it works, which is why a lot of engineers keep the same speakers forever and ever, amen, because they know them. So yeah, that is just literally experience of knowing your speaker, listening to your speaker, and kind of mixing and listening to your mixes in lots of different environments. So when I come back here and I talk about what speakers kind of right for you, you know, Hans Zimmer's using Quested speakers, which are, you know, massive, great speakers. They're you know, they're hugely expensive, of course, but a lot of sound, you know, big output in his room. You know, Then we've got people, people I follow and people I admire. So Daniel James, who does his film music scores and his game scores, he's using very, very cheap speakers from MAudio, which we're going to actually cover in this video. That's these ones at 239 per pair, and his music's amazing. Off of probably one of the cheapest set of speakers you can buy on the market. So I can't fault that at all. So it really is not necessarily about cost or what's best or right for you, is what I'm trying to basically say. It's what works for you. So go down to the store. I know Anderton's, if you're near me in Surrey, in Guildford, I think you can listen to some in a room there. There's even some places I've seen where you might be able to borrow them. You might be able to borrow a set of speakers and check them out. Go around any of your mates who've got a set of speakers. Just try and listen to them before you buy them. Read reviews and things like that. In terms of connecting them, mine are connected via XLR, which is basically, you'll see, if you Google XLR, you'll recognise that cable. It's a microphone cable, essentially, that's balanced. But you can plug them in through a balanced 1/4" jack as well. Balanced and unbalanced, really you're going to be using a balanced connection, because that's all about noise reduction in a cable. You don't need to get too bogged down with this stuff, guys, but an unbalanced signal is going to essentially detract from the clarity. It's going to add noise to your output. So you're going to need balanced setup, which most of the audio interface itself and the speakers will pretty much accept and output balanced signal. So you'll be connecting up via XLR or a 1/4" jack. That's basically just how you're going to connect it. A 1/4" jack is like a guitar cable, essentially. Okay, so let's jump onto the web and take a look at some speakers that I've basically picked out for you guys to discuss today in this video. So starting off here, KRK's website is laid out amazingly in terms of what speakers they've got. And the reason I've chosen this site to start with is that it really puts the size of speakers next to each other, so we can click through really easily and see the comparisons. But what they've also done, if we say the Rocket 5s, which is the ones I've got, and we go to support and documentations, they've got this cut sheet, which basically looks like this. And the good thing with this is it puts all this information right next to each other, and I'm going to try my best to explain this to you guys in a way that I hope is useful. We're not going to go into all of this stuff, but I'm going to talk about what I think is important to consider and have a think about, and even a conversation before you go ahead and buy the speakers. So this has put the Rocket 5, 6s and 8s next to each other. And it's amazingly put this data for us. So again, Rocket 5, 5" woofer. Rocket 6, 6" woofer. Rocket 8, 8, you get the deal. And it's kind of showing us each increment of size what the response is doing. So the top end remains the same. So at 20, probably 2021, our hearing starts to cut off. And like I said, it's more about than what you feel. I don't really think you feel much when it cut. I could be wrong completely here, but I interpret stuff you feel more in the bassy frequencies. So obviously this number here at 35 is going lower than this one here at 45 because the cone's bigger. This is all about power and electricity and energy. So the bigger the woofer or the driver is, the more response you're going to essentially get in the lower frequencies, because it's just can push out more energy, if that makes sense. So if you were kind of working to film and you're mixing, say you're creating explosions all day, you're probably gonna need a subwoofer anyway, but you're gonna need something that's got quite a big cone to it, and you're probably gonna drive whoever you live with or your family, or hopefully you're lucky enough to live in an isolated place, because you're gonna drive them bloody nuts, because bass travels very well through walls. Yeah, so this speaker is going to give you the largest frequency response, whereas, say, this one here is cutting off at 45, so if you bring this image up, it's going to die probably around here. This line here would be 45. Your sound's completely kind of gone at that point, whereas this one here, where we're going all the way down to 35, you're going to be, more kind of here. You'll still be hearing sound. So you've got a higher response. Again, the high ends, they're pretty much all still there at 35, which again is outside the audible range. Total power, this is talking about watts. So, each driver in these, like we said, we've got a two-way configuration. So, the total power is the sum of those two figures. Again, it's all about loudness, really. So this, for me, you know, outputting 100 watts in my room would be a nightmare. I just don't need that much sound. If you're going to be kind of DJing with these speakers as well, you're probably going to want to get something a little bigger, and you're just going to have them low to output. You know, 75 watts in your lower frequencies is massive, really. Your peak LPS is all about sound pressure level. So what this means is that this is how far you can push your speaker before it basically starts to distort on you. And not be very happy at all. So, you know, if you push this speaker to say like 130, it'd probably blow up. So it's useful to know what you've got. Then of course we've got it talks about our connectors, which are the same across the whole range. So we've got unbalanced, which again I spoke about, is where it's essentially going to be a bit noisy. So the longer the cable, the less the clarity of the sound you've got. Really, you're going to want balanced, and you're probably going to be connecting it through XLR or TRS, which again is a 1/4" jack. Then you've got controls on the back. So again, this is a subjective. I mean, can I grab a picture of the back of one of these speakers up, because that will make life really easy to explain this to you guys. These here. So this is where you can basically adjust the high frequency level and the low frequency level. So your room may naturally say collect more. Perhaps it doesn't amplify the high frequencies as well as you'd hoped. You know, you're listening to your mix in your car, and it's like, well, hang on a minute, it doesn't sound as crisp as it does in my room. Maybe you want to turn the decibels down on your tweeter. So that's what this is all about down here. This is about your adjustments for basically volume. Which on mine, by the way, the volume of the speakers is all the way up on both, and I control it from the desk. I'd kind of almost recommend you guys do the same. And then you've got your kind of your lower frequencies and your higher frequencies. This is really important because, you know, how big your speaker is kind of matters. Like I said, can you even fit, you know, that would be massive in my room. Could I actually even fit that in? No. So that, you know, that's useful information to have as well. Then you've got your fuse ratings. I mean, yeah, whatever. If it goes wrong, change the fuse and read what it says on the plug. So like I say, you know, this chart is really useful. You know, if you're, like I say, I've got the 5 inches. This is fine by me. Let's try and get the sheet up for the bigger speaker. So let's go for the 3-way configuration. So the 3-way configuration, what they've basically done is they've put an extra driver into the speaker. So they would have thought, all these speakers, by the way, guys, you know, they're not just great, sexy designs. You know, they've been designed in a way to for all the different kind of tweeters and drivers within the speaker cabinet. It's been designed in a way to output the sound in as optimum conditions as possible. So what they've basically done is we've got our bass port again, so firing the bass out at us, not into the corners of the wall. Good. Then we've got a kind of a lower can't speak. A lower woofer at the bottom, dealing with our low frequencies. That's your 10-inch one there. Then you've got a 4-inch mid-frequency, mid-range driver. Then you've got your tweeter. So the tweeter here is probably exactly the same as what's in all of the other speakers, but it's these two that are changing. And then obviously your bass port is going to compensate for the sum of all of those, both of these drivers working together. So in my mind, personally, to me, if you can get a 3-way driver, has this got a fact sheet I can look at? It's got a cut sheet. Let's have a look at it. What have we got? What information have... aha, this would have been better than just wicked. Right, I should have showed you this, guys, to begin with. So, now we've got our one that's standing out on the end there, the Rocket 10.3, the 3-way driver versus the 2-way driver. And as you can see, there's quite a big difference. So, total power, the sum of all these three is now 148 watts. And we can push it to 110 before you start blowing drivers and blowing your tweeters up. And our frequency response again, wow, like, so we've all gone all the way down to 25 to 30, which is huge. So you're going to be able to really hear and feel a lot of what's going on in these speakers. So yeah, that's almost giving you... I mean, it's going to be 14.4 is far too... I'm going to need a new house. But yeah, this is really useful information, guys. So go on the KRK website and have a look. You know, more if you want really loudspeakers, essentially in a nutshell, get that. Loudspeakers that cover the largest frequency range as possible. You want a bigger speaker. You know, this is for really small rooms, and that to me at 51 is a little too. Is cutting off a little too high. You know, this works well for me, but I'm kind of, as I move up, I'll be gravitating up to perhaps the 8 or even the 10 when I move studio, hopefully next year. So, you know, price wise, again, we're jumping onto DV 24/7. And they're starting all over the place. So, you know, for our Rocket 5s, they're 121 each. Again, remember I said about it being a single and a pair. They're not selling them as a pair, so you're going to be paying, you know, £242 basically for a set of these. Moving all the way up, we should be able to find those 10s on here. 400 quid a speaker, basically. But they're going to have reviews, I'd hope. And information on here, but I'd jump to, you know, use DV 24/7 or you know, Andertons or any of those sites to buy the speaker, but actually go to the manufacturer's website. You know, to me this is really interesting and useful information. There's even videos that you can actually watch introducing you to the family of speakers, and get involved in some of the conversations that are happening online as well. So yeah, you know, like DV 24/7, my kind of go-to store, if you like. They've got a list here of all the different KRK speakers that they deal with. So moving on, because I feel like I've been talking about KRK forever. These are the MAudio BX8D2s, active studio monitors, and it's a pair. So you're talking £239 for a pair of speakers, which is awesome. You know, again, as I may have mentioned in the beginning of the video, one of the guys I follow on YouTube, and I followed his career for quite a few years, is a guy called Daniel James. Go and check him out. If you like your film and game music, I'm sure you've heard of him already. But he uses these speakers, and his mixes sound great. So, you know, just because they're £239, guys, does not mean that they're rubbish by any means whatsoever. Frequency response, 38 to 22. So we come back to this again, you're going to be almost kind of about here to, you know, beyond 22. So perhaps not quite, you know, where were we? What did we say? We said 38. So comparing to these, you're kind of almost in this bracket of the 6-inch cone, which for a speaker which has got, where are we now? Does it mention the size of the cone? Oh yeah, 8-inch look. So that's pretty much the same, if you like, as the 8-inch KRKs, but they're just going to be way lower in price. I mean, 239 for the pair versus what? These are about 250 quid each. You're looking at 500 quid for a speaker that's doing a similar thing. Again, I do kind of like the fact that KRK pretty much just make speakers. MAudio make like everything. Not necessarily a bad thing, but I just think it means that KRK are obviously investing a lot of their money in actually developing speakers, to me, which it holds some weight. But again, you can compare. So, you know, here we've got low frequency amplifiers at 70 watts. If we look at the 8-inch here, where we got low frequency, 75 watts versus yeah, so the KRKs are slightly louder. Higher 60 watts. Let's go back here. We're looking at the 8, at 25. So, you know, this is going to be louder there. It's all these kind of things you need to look at. You know, like I said, you need to consider your room and how loud you want things to be. So these are going to be technically louder than the KRKs, because our total here on the 8 is 100 watts. Our total here is obviously a lot more than that. So take into consideration that again, obviously they've got listed here the dimensions of the speaker. I don't know if you've got some stuff on the back here that you can change. That doesn't look like you have. You've got volumes, and that's kind of about it. So if you are trying to change your, like I said, if your mixes are a little dull in your room and you need to amplify it, you can't do that with these, which is a little bit of a shame, because that is something that I have used on mine quite a bit. But yeah, I recommend these. I think they're good, and they look great. So if you're looking for, if that's your budget and you need a set of speakers, you know, pick them up, because, you know, like I say, just because Daniel James is making amazing music on them doesn't necessarily mean you will. But, you know, I know they're being used, and they have been used for very kind of good projects, let's put it that way. Adam, so probably some of the coolest looking speakers I've seen. I really love this here. They're kind of they're almost like custom designed tweeter at the top there. Again, getting a little pricey, so you're looking at 459 quid for a single speaker. They've got their... I don't know if I like that so much on the front, personally. I don't care about having the decibels on the front because, like I said, mine are all the way up. And they stay all the way up. You've got controls here. This picture's really pixelated, sorry about that. So again, you can change your how much of your highs or your lows that you perhaps would want. And let's have a quick look at what they're saying here. So we got a 7-inch cone by the looks of it on these. And again, you've got your frequency response 42 to 50. Not too bad. You know, and they're quite loud again. So, you know, your tweeter is going to be 50 and your woofer is 100. So, yeah, quite loud speakers again. Then you're jumping up. So this was, remember I mentioned the old engineer who used to teach me, Phil Bodger. He had these, I believe, in his studio. So this is for the pair, £1,000, £500 each. You know, they've got a really good name. Frequency response of 58 to 20. Yeah, perhaps. So where are we now? Where's my chart? 58. It's probably a little cut. You'd need some sort of sub, something to deal with the subs, in my opinion, or you'd need to compensate and be aware of that. But I know these speakers as well, we'll add this in, they do work very well in terms of a surround sound setup because they're not huge, and you can place them in your room and keep adding to them, basically. So if surround sound's something that you want to build in the future, it may well be something that you'd like to consider, basically, with this configuration. Vocals, expensive but really good. So you'd be looking at about £3 for the pair. I used these when I studied at uni in a studio, so when I was mixing on the big audience desks, this is what they had connected up to that. Again, it's a 3-way configuration. Frequency response of 40 to 40, pretty damn good. You know, loud, definitely loud. You know, and they're not huge. They're not huge speakers. They've got more of a, as you can see from the picture, they are more of like an oblong shape than a stand-up shape. I have seen people put them up the other way around, which didn't make a huge amount of sense to me, but, you know, I can see why people do that, depending on where they want the cones to basically hit their ears. People will do that. You see sometimes in Zimmer's studio, his speakers are kind of on their side, basically, and he claims that's because the mids and the highs sit better with his ear, which, you know, who's going to argue with the guy? So, yeah, I mean, if you're really going for it and you're building like an actual studio, the reason I brought these up is that I've used them, and I really liked them. I thought they gave a very good representation of the sound from what I was mixing, and kind of when I took my mixes out of the studio and kind of listened to them at home or in the car, I wasn't displeased, if you know what I mean. So, you know, those are the ones that I kind of picked out because they're ones, like I say, that I've heard of, and they're what I've either used or seen being used and felt they'd be worth kind of talking about. There are, of course, a whole bunch of other companies here which we haven't looked at, but I've named. So JBL we used a lot in the cinemas because they can handle a lot of loud volume without distorting, which of course in that environment you need. Quested we didn't look at purely because a lot of their speakers are basically passive, which I said at the beginning of the video we didn't want to be doing, but I'm going to bring some up just so you can see them. If we bring up some images here, this is what Quested speakers look like. So these bad boys here are what is in Remote Control Productions, Hans Zimmer Studios. They do custom stands and all sorts of stuff, and some of the speakers themselves are absolutely huge. I mean, if we put Quested, let's just put Hans Zimmer, so you'll see them. Those two there are Quested speakers, and they're on their side. That is also a Quested speaker, which is huge. So yeah, these would be too big for my application, but that's what's being used in remote control by a lot of the guys there. And yeah, like I say, who's to argue with them? So yeah, they're really good speakers. Obviously Yamaha I didn't really talk about just because I haven't really used them, but I wanted to add them because obviously they are a company that have been around forever, and their NS10s are famous for being used in studios. So I hope that video was useful, guys. You know, I hope nothing was. Let me know if anything was confusing. You want me to go over it again? Like I say, really consider what speaker you get. Get used to them. Learn to love them. Learn to kind of love their inadequacies, or if you like, or where they overcompensate your mixes, and learn to work around them. There is some room correction stuff that you can do. I think SonarWorks is quite a popular one at the moment. I use IK Multimedia's Arc. And I'm gonna do a video about that separately in the future. But basically, you play a bunch of sine waves from your speakers, and you move like a microphone around the room, and take you know, snapshots of how the sound's being picked up, and then it applies an EQ on your master bus to basically adjust your speaker output to how the room's sounding to what the speakers are playing out, if that makes sense. But don't worry about that too much for now. We'll talk about that in another video. Again, please rate, comment, subscribe. Follow me everywhere would be cool. We have a chat on Instagram, seems to be the place I'm talking to most people, so find me MW Bell Music. Twitter, MW Bell Music, and I'll see you guys next week for a video on headphones. We'll be going through what you can be using there, and I'm going to elaborate a little in that video as well about perhaps the difference between mixing on headphones and speakers and the advantages between the two. But okay, guys, take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Okay, bye bye.